throughout the islands. A tense bond had become a powerful friendship with a promise of independence. But all that history was at risk. War began in China and then Europe, but soon spread to the Pacific.
December 7, 1941, we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. We were scheduled to play the USS Arizona for Fleet Football Championship. About 7 minutes or 8, the attack came. We didn't have time to change clothes at all. We thought maybe we'd be in a war, but we didn't figure there that they would attack us because we were so strong.
Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor plunges America into World War II. Within 6 hours of Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces began attacks on Hong Kong, the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, Thailand, Malaya, and Borneo, seizing strategic bases throughout the Pacific.
My older brother George was a naval aviator and was assigned to a dive bomber squadron aboard the carrier Bunker Hill. He had a strong desire to get into combat. It was a moment of realization that now we're into it up to our neck.
Philippines come. We are all American Army. My father told me, you better join, the war is coming.
After preliminary landings in northern Luzon to capture bases and airfields, the Japanese launched their main assault through the Lingayen Gulf on December 22nd.
We were told that there was going to be small arms and ammunition and a few troops. What we found was 30,000 Japanese troops, flamethrowers, armored vehicles, tanks. We found everything.
They sweep through the island in Manila Falls on January 2nd, 1942. Outgunned American and Filipino troops withdraw into the Bataan Peninsula.
My grandfather, his unit was assigned at the Abukay line. He tried to enter one foxhole, but was directly hit by a bomb. You could just see the arms and the legs of his comrades hanging from the fallen trees.
In March of 1942, General Douglas MacArthur is ordered to leave the defenders of Bataan and Corregidor behind. He promises to return.
Fellows in the army went to Bataan to fight the Japanese. Bataan was where they had their last stand.
Following weeks of bombings and artillery barrages, massive assaults forced the American and Filipino fighters to surrender. For the U.S., it's a shocking loss. The sacrifice will inspire a determination to regain Filipino independence. What comes next will be even worse. For most, the Bataan Death March began on foot at Mariveles.
Number one, we had no food or water. Most of the men were sick. They had malaria, they had dysentery, they had a gunshot wound, they had problems. And then some of the Filipino people started to throw us food. You'd grab whatever you could, and then you'd take a bite and give it to the guy next to you to take a bite.
The guard never let us get any water. I saw one kid, he tried to go to the faucet and he was killed. Right there, he was killed. Just to get some drink.
Upon reaching the train station in San Fernando, some 66 miles to the north, the prisoners were squeezed into World War I boxcars, 100 men or more, in a space meant for 40.
The condition inside that wagon was so horrible that people started to suffocate. In fact, my grandfather was inside that wagon with his cousin. Unfortunately, that cousin of his died inside that wagon.
Thousands of Filipinos and Americans die on the Bataan Death March. Survivors end up in brutal prison camps.
My father reached Camp O'Donnell after deboarding, and the conditions there were so bad. There was only one water spigot for thousands of men, 10,000, 12,000 men.
And the men were dying 40, 50, or 100 a day. They were dying from malaria and dysentery. It was awful. There was no question about it.
Across the Pacific, the situation is bleak. Throughout the beginning months of 1942, one island after another falls to the Japanese. Slowly, the tide of war begins to shift. First the Doolittle raid, then the Battle of the Coral Sea. Despite suffering heavy losses, the Allies push back against the Japanese forces. Meanwhile, resistance groups spring up across the Philippines.
Not all the troops surrendered. Some of them lighted out for the mountains or the countryside to become guerrillas.
My dad is with the U.S. Army. He was asked to organize guerrilla movement and was assigned in the propaganda corps.
When the Filipinos had been let go, they were told to even sign a form saying that I will not join any guerrilla activities, but of course the great majority of them did continue to fight.
In June 1942, at the Battle of Midway, American naval forces hand the Japanese their first major defeat. Back home, news of the victory at Midway is a huge boost for morale, and the Allies begin their determined advance to reclaim the Pacific and liberate the Philippines. Thousands of Allied military personnel sacrificed their lives to ensure victories at Guadalcanal, in and around New Guinea and elsewhere, just as the Filipinos continue their own fight for freedom. Across the islands, the guerrillas, resupplied by U.S. submarines and parachute drops, make Japanese forces miserable for almost 4 years, spying on and sabotaging Japanese camps and installations.
My great-grandfather, he was confined at the Philippine General Hospital. He just pretended to be sick. Whenever he'd get visitors, they were actually the informants that would carry out his orders or directives for all of the underground activities.
Ed handled 40,000 men under guerrilla forces. They would blow up bridges, blow up depots. He had no idea if it will become successful or not, or he will die the next day.
Civilians protected the guerrilla troops, often at great risk to themselves.
We just go about like ordinary civilians, doing our work, gathering the intelligence that we were going to send to General MacArthur.
They believed in his mission, which was to turn around, wait for MacArthur, who said, I will return. And he kept his promise.
In the early hours of October 20th, 1944, an incredible sight. A vast convoy steaming towards the island of Leyte. The three-day naval battle for Leyte Gulf and the successful landings set the stage for the liberation of the Philippines. General MacArthur has kept his promise.
I think a lot of people feared he shall return there and we'll wait for him to come back. In fact, I watched him with binoculars. I watched him on his way to the shore.
The Sixth Army lands on Luzon and battles its way across the island. On February 3rd, 1945, American troops and Filipino guerrillas reached the outskirts of Manila.